Hello. Today is January 14th, 2026. I'm meeting today with Mr. Jim Widlar at his home in Lyons, Colorado. My name is Brad Hoops. I'm the interviewer for Remember and Honor Veterans History Project. Welcome, Jim, and thanks for sitting down this morning to tell your story.
Well, thanks for stopping by.
Very good. Let's start out, if we could. Tell us a little bit about yourself, date of birth, where you're born, a little bit about your family and growing up, if you would.
Oh, I was born in the 1940s, in November 25th. And we grew up, my dad got assigned to the Underwater Sound Lab in New London, Connecticut, and I was still in diapers when we were there. And he was one of the designers of the sound buoy they used to find the submarines with.
Oh, wow.
In fact, dropped the first test buoy into the Long Island Sound from an aircraft.
Oh, interesting.
And we moved back, we moved around a lot. We moved to Cleveland. We lived in Cleveland and ended up down in Texas for my dad's health after the war. And he always said the starvation was worse by staying down there, so we ended up back in Cleveland. And grew up, went to high school there. We bounced around. My dad died when I was young, and my mom took care of the four of us then. So
the four children. Where did you fit in that?
I had an older brother, Tom, and two older brothers, Tom and Bob, and my sister Jane. So. And Jane was about 4 years old when my dad died. So.
Oh, man.
So, but my mom took care of us, and she was a trooper.
Wow. So you said you grew up and graduated from high school in the Cleveland area?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And then after high school, where take your story from there?
Well, I worked all through high school. I worked at a hardware store. I worked at a print shop. I ended up working in construction as a hod carrier, carrying mortar and bricks up the side of the house. And one day I got out of high school and I went down to the local drugstore. We didn't have a pot to piss in, so I went down to the local drugstore and I got a newspaper and I'm circling the Wanayets looking for places to go to work. And Nate, the pharmacist, came over. He said, "Jim, what are you doing all dressed up?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to take the bus downtown Cleveland and go find a job." He says, "Go talk to Harry over there. He needs someone to help him wire houses." And I went over and talked to Harry Lieben from West Shore Electric, and he says, "You can't do it in those clothes, kid. Go home and change."
Hired you right on the spot, huh?
And I started. That's when I started working in the electrical industry.
I'll be darned. Wow. And to this day, you're still doing it.
Yeah.
So something that you took with you and you enjoyed, or
I enjoyed it. I used to. I ended up, joining the Air Force, and I was going to go in the Navy, but I learned how to know how to swim. So I knew I picked the right service when I got in the Air Force, because they canceled bivouac because of rain.
So what took you from wiring houses to the Air Force? How did you make that adjustment?
Well, your number was coming up.
Oh, okay. So this was obviously in the 60s?
In 1919, I joined December 15th, 1960.
Okay.
I was in basic training when I was 20 years old then. I was in basic training, and my mother had forwarded my draft notice to me.
No, I'll be darned. Wow.
And the TI saw it, and he said, looks like we got you just in time."
Wow. How was that adjustment for you, going from civilian life into military life? Was that much of an adjustment, or?
Well, the first couple of days, I wondered what the hell I was doing. So I got a clean-cut haircut before I went, but they still cut my hair off.
And where did you take your basic training?
Took my basic training down at Lackland Air Force Base, and they promised me I was going to be in the electrical because of my background. And so I got out of basic training, and they sent us up to Shepherd, and I was signed up for being a reciprocating engine mechanic. and I wasn't too happy. And we went there, and they read off about 4 weeks of class, people that were going to go to start classes in the next week. Then they read off about 4 weeks of people that were going to do on KP duty for the next 4 weeks. And then they read off 4 names, and they said, you guys go to this building, 1200 something, I forget what it was. And we said, what the hell are we in for? And we
You're one of those 4?
I was one of those 4. And we go over there, and we went to school on the Thor Intercontinental Intermediate Range Missile, the single, and graduated from class. Was assigned to Cheyenne, Wyoming, and got there in June of 1960. In 1961, the June of 1961, and and it was really kind of interesting because when I was 17, I was in my mom's backyard taking time exposure pictures of the Sputnik going over.
Oh, wow.
And when I was 20 years old, I was on my first launch pad. When I was 21, I was out at Vandenberg, and I was on 4 launches in 10 months, 2 of them 3 days apart, and I was about 2,500 feet from a pad when another squadron launched a missile, and it blew up about 3,500 feet in front of us. And I do have pieces of that in my scrapbook.
Wow, wow.
So,
well, you obviously you survived it, but I mean that seems very close for an explosion.
it was fantastic. Yeah, it was just after sunset, and it lit the sky up. The missile was when it lifted off with the pad, it had 14,000 gallons of RP1, which is high grade kerosene, and 18,000 gallons of liquid oxygen. And but everybody they took us out to the fence line in one of these little Bluebird school buses. It was, that the Air Force used to have, and everybody was running for the bus when all the stuff was coming down, and I just went underneath because Vandenberg is all sandy soil, and got out and started picking up pieces.
Man.
So
I can't imagine watching a launch, just the sheer power and
it's
such,
amazing.
but the explosion.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I
been United Launch Alliance took me out to a couple at Cape Canaveral, and there you're 2.5 miles from the pad, and they said, "But this is really loud." I said, "Try 2,500 feet."
Yeah, right.
They don't let you get close anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that never had long-term effects like on your hearing or anything, did it?
No, I put a claim in with the VA, and they said there's no proof that it's caused by my time in the service. So my roommate who asked me, he said, my roommate Doug asked me he says, give me that letter. He's in South Carolina, and he turned my same letter, and then he got the hearing aids.
Really?
So I said, I'm your agent. You need to split with me.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, talk about a little bit about your what you did with the missile program, what your responsibilities were.
Well, I was with launch maintenance, so we prepped we had maintenance on every missile every 90 days. We would put a missile on the launcher, and then we would service it 90 days. 180 days, they'd erect a missile and load it with propellants. They'd take the batteries out, the igniters out, and the warhead off, and simulate a launch. And then they'd lay it back down we were above ground coffins, so the missile laid on a 90-degree angle, and we had to raise it, load it with propellants and fuel, and then that took about 15-20 minutes. And then you could launch.
Wow! You could do that all in 20 minutes.
Yeah, we loaded the RP1 at about 4,500 gallons a minute, and we loaded the liquid oxygen at 6,500 gallons a minute. And
even just describing that sounds dangerous to me. That whole time period? I mean, being around those materials and such.
Well, we had helium at 5,500 pounds. We had the hydraulic fluid at about 3,000 psi, and we had liquid nitrogen and liquid oxygen. I did a presentation for General Cotton's 20th Air Force Commander's Call, and one of the captains asked me, weren't you worried about how hazardous it was to be around there? And I said, it was safer than Vietnam.
Yeah, well, true, I guess.
so
Wow.
Yeah. But it was really kind of interesting. Time went fast. We would get a new missile in, and we'd take it. We'd offload it from a C-133B Cargo Master. I have a model of one over there, and then when times we'd take it in our missile assembly building, put the nacelles back on it, get it ready to go out and mate it to a launcher, take the missile that was on that launcher out, get it ready for air transport, load it on the C-133 Cargo Master at the Cheyenne Airport, escort it out to Vandenberg, and prepare it for launch out there. And we would fire off into from Vandenberg into the Marshall Islands to Eniwetok and Kwajalein. And at that time, the Army was out there trying to shoot us down with the Nike Zeus and Nike Hercules. So I don't know if they ever made it a success. We were never told that. We were just told maybe how close it came to the target.
So you would jump back and forth between Cheyenne and Vandenberg then?
Well, yeah. That's kind of most of my travels.
Yeah. Now, were you career Air Force? Did you make it a career? Or?
Yeah, 3 years, 10 months, 8 days.
Oh, okay, yeah.
They deactivated us, and we weren't. They told us no early outs, and they deactivated us. I got to spend a TDY one time down in a temporary duty down at McConnell Air Force Base down in Wichita Falls, or Wichita, Kansas. And we were escorting contractors in the Titan II silos. So I spent about 30 days in a Titan II silo.
Oh, really? Yeah.
That TDY was abruptly canceled when Tonkin Bay happened.
Oh, wow.
And everything went back on Ready State A again. And the F-4s were taking off, and we were put on a bus and sent back to Cheyenne.
What was it? Well, during that time period as well, it was the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Cuban Missile Crisis.
Talk about what conditions were like during that.
Well, the Cuban crisis came up, and I was supposed to. My brother went to CU, and I was supposed to go down and see him that weekend before. And on the 18th of October, which was a Thursday, we went on alert, and we were at 12 hours on, 12 hours off. And then Kennedy spoke on the 18th the 22nd of October. And and so then things really got locked down. And about 2 days later, General Powers, who came over the PA system at our SAC-wide, Strategic Air Command wide, and which was usually a coded message to people, and he says, "This is not a drill. We are DEFCON 2, and this is This is the only time we went to DEFCON 2, and at that time we had 660 B-52s. A third of those were airborne every 8 hours, and then we had 75 B-58s. And those were paired off, each 2 B-58s at 75 different civilian airports in the United States, loaded with nuclear weapons, and each with a 2-man crew. So someone was always manning in the jet. And we had about 200 ICBMs at that time. Then after that, our maximum of ICBMs went to. The maximum we had at one time was 1,054, and we stayed on alert. They talk about the 13 days in October. We stayed on alert and were restricted to the barracks until the 27th of November.
Wow, wow.
So it was a little longer than the public
Yeah,
knew.
yeah, yeah. Well, so what would be your responsibility should all hell break loose, I guess?
Well, we had missiles in our missile assembly building, and hopefully we would, if something was launched, we would try to go ready a pad to put another missile on. And those missiles, our missiles were built like a balloon. The forward bulkhead of them was 11 thousandths of an inch thick. The aft bulkhead was 27 thousandths or 47 thousandths of an inch thick, and 46 thousandths is a new dime. And so there was no internal structure; they were just pressurized. And the whole missile weighed 25,000 pounds and carried 250,000 pounds of propellant. And so if you had to keep it inflated, or like that picture I showed you earlier, if it wasn't inflated, it just collapsed. And or you kept it in stretch. So someone was on duty 24 hours a day in our missile assembly buildings in case one of those missiles lost pressure. And that's why when we escorted them on the C-133 Cargo Master, we had to maintain tank pressures as we flew across the country.
Adjusting to, I would imagine, pressure flying at altitudes.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Was there any time during your career that you had a scary incident?
No, but my roommate related one. He said that one time we had there was a klaxon on the trailer when the pressurization went off. You know, when there was a differential. We had to keep the fuel tank with a higher pressure than the liquid oxygen tank because it had a conical bulkhead, and if you over pressurized it, the bulkhead on the wrong end, it would reverse it and contaminate the tanks. So the klaxon went off, and just as they're about to land, and the pilot of the Cargo Master says, I don't know if that's your klaxon or if it's ours. He says, if it's yours, you better go silent. So if it's ours, it means our landing gear aren't down. So, but it turned out he wrestled back and got things settled. But it was kind of interesting flying on those.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah.
Reverting back, you talked about being down in Wichita in the silo. So you spent time that time in the actual silo
in the actual silo.
Yeah. What would talk a little bit about what that's like? What life down in the silo was
Well,
like?
you know, it goes down multiple levels and elevators in it, and they had a lot of construction workers. There's a Titan II silo down in Green Valley down in Arizona that you can go visit.
Oh.
That's pretty. It's almost intact. They put a little glass window over the top so the Russians can see that there's no missile in it. But it was loaded with hydrazine all the time, and those would fire right out of the silo. There were a couple of mishaps with a couple of the Titan silos. I recently went down to Green Valley with my brother-in-law, and there's some interlocking doors. These doors weigh tons, and they're machine surfaces, and they've got pins. And so you come in from the outside, and you go in the first door, and you close all the doors. And depending on where you want to go, you have to open a valve and change the pressure in there to open the other tank, because they always have a positive pressure where the personnel are, and a negative pressure where the missile and the propellants are. And so my brother-in-law had never seen this stuff. I'd spent 30 days in one of these, and there all these tourists, and they were giving them a briefing on it, and I just stood way in the back. And the fellow that's giving the briefing said to me, "Would you close that door?" And he's expecting a response on how heavy it was. And so I closed the door, and he gave me a smile. He says, "You've done that before." So
So the missiles that you worked with, would lay flat and then
go up to 90 degrees.
up to 90 degrees.
And then you would we'd start loading them with RP1, which is high grade kerosene. We'd start a chill down of the liquid oxygen tank. There were some titanium bottles that they would fill with helium for pressurization during the flight. And at the same time, and those bottles were built like a thermos bottle. They were round titanium bottles, and they flowed liquid nitrogen over them to super cool the helium to get more volume in. And at the same time they were doing all this, they were heating the engine compartment of the missile, because with all the liquid oxygen and the liquid nitrogen, they were worried about it getting so cold that the fuel would gel, and the hydraulics would gel. So it was all not much electronics. It was mostly relays and it was old World War II technology.
Really? Yeah.
In fact, the Atlas missile, its first designator was a B-65, which was a bomber designation because it was designed during the Army Air Corps. And it changed into SM-65 as the first strategic missile.
So you said from the time you got notice to prepare a launch, it would take you about 20 minutes to...
Yeah, and then it was prepared, and if you could fire that one, our blockhouses were set up with, each blockhouse had 3 missiles. And so they would get the missile prepared. Then this was ideal, the situation that was supposed to happen. Then they could launch it, but they had an antenna. They were radio guidance, so they tracked it for 5 minutes, and they couldn't launch another missile until they could give that antenna again, because they had one antenna for 3 missiles. And it was interesting. The missiles went up and pitched and yawed off the pad. They had a set target and a roll voltage, so they knew the direction they were going to go. And then the propellant utilization valve was timed to shut at a certain point, and that would make it the apogee where it was. It was like a big artillery show.
Really?
It didn't have the particular guidance that they, with GPS and stuff they do today. We up in Cheyenne, they deactivated after the Soviet Union dissolved. They had taken, they had 200 Minuteman IIIs up there, and they took 50 of those silos and put the MX missile in, which Reagan demanded to be named the Peacekeeper, like the 45 during the Wild West. And each one of those peacekeepers, of those 50 peacekeepers, had 10 warheads. And when the Soviet Union dissolved and they got that treaty, that's when they eliminated all those. And one of those sites has now been made a tourist site up there that you can go visit.
Now, the site over in Greeley, was that part of your responsibility back in the day?
That was Atlas E. I was Atlas D. But it was very similar. And they were horizontal, but they were the first missile with all inertial guidance. And they were, where our missiles were in a configuration of our 564th Squadron had six Atlases on one site. The 565th Squadron had 9 missiles on 3 different sites. And the 566th, which was the E, had 9 missiles on 9 different sites. In fact, there was a site in Fort Collins, and that was it was on some Forest Service land, and they've demolished that. But that was the alternate command post in case Cheyenne got taken out during the Cuban crisis.
Yeah. So you went through your career. Was there any thought of making it a career, or you just wanted to get your enlistment in?
Well, I used to go home on my 30-day leave and work for my old boss, and I made more money on my 30-day leave than I did afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I went back to Cleveland and worked there one winter and one summer, and you know, Cleveland was so crappy. We used to go to Detroit for the weekends. And so when they sent me to Cheyenne, I saw blue skies for the first time in my life, and I ended up in California
Yeah. So then, post-military career, you went on to into the electrical industry.
Well, I was always with the electrical industry.
Just
So
continued that and made that your career.
made that career. I worked for a company called Cupertino Electric for 28 years out of the Bay Area. Worked for National Semiconductor before Cupertino Electric, and in fact, I went out there and I went to work for National Semiconductor. And Cupertino Electric had a half a dozen guys working in our facility, and I kept them out for 9 months. And one of the fellows said, "Why don't you come to work for us?" And so I went to them, and they hired me, and I spent 28 years there.
Doing primarily, what were your primary responsibilities there?
Well, I started in the residential, went into the commercial, ended up running projects, ended up going back and running the National Semiconductor buildings.
Wow.
And then in '79 they opened an office. We were doing a project in Santa Clara, doing an HP building, and the HP said, "Would you like to do another building just like it?" And they said, "Sure. Where is it?" And they said, "Colorado." And the company said no. And what had happened is the $1.5 million electrical job in Santa Clara was going to cost them $2.5 million in Colorado because of contractor improprieties. And finally David Packard called up Gene Revisa of Cupertino Electric and said, "What would it take for you to do that building?" And we set up an operation. They gave us the thing at about set up an extra 25% to set up an operation. We opened an office in Longmont, did IBM buildings, Hewlett Packard buildings,
Wow.
storage tech, and then ended up going back to California about 1988, and things were slow, and then came back here in about '92. And
been here ever since.
And they decided to close the office down, and so I started my own company, Breckenridge Electric, and we went up to do that. Started as a fluke. I was gonna retire at 55, and went up to the mountains and told them I'd buy this house that was under construction if they let me wire it. And next year I did 45 units. So, and then when Cupertino left, everybody started calling, and I ended up doing project management for other contractors. And I did Adams County Detention Center, Rapo Chemical, stuff like that for other people, and they just and then I started about 8 years ago now doing electrical inspections with a company out of California.
Outstanding! Wow.
So that's just part-time. So
yeah. Boy, what a great career!
Yeah.
What a variety career!
Yeah.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Well, talk a little bit about family. How you met your wife and wooed her, and children, grandchildren, however you'd like to talk about it.
Well, it's just I've got a son, Michael. I got divorced when Mike was about 5 years old, and California wasn't a very good place to raise kids, and we came out here and moved to a little town of Hygiene, and it had about 200 people. Chris, I hired Chris at work, and then she got divorced, and she has a boy, Bill, and he lives close to us. In fact, he's really involved in the space industry.
Huh?
Mike is on the East Coast in Connecticut. Back, here he was born in San Jose, and I always think it's ironic. we ended up in Connecticut and then out to California, and he ends up back there.
Yeah, yeah.
But he's got a master in computer science, and got a couple of really three smart kids, and we get to see him on on trips and the kids together, and then Bill's here in town with the other three.
So 6
Yeah,
grandchildren?
yeah.
Yeah.
So each have 2 boys and a girl. So,
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
yeah, so.
Well, I know I've only got probably the very tip of the iceberg with your story here. Is there anything we didn't talk about that you want to talk about? Anything, any stories that have floated to the top as we've been sitting here that you want to talk about to hopefully round out your story a little bit better, or do you think we've covered everything that you would like to cover?
I still enjoy my involvement with I'm a founding member of the Air Force Association of
Yeah, talk
Missileers.
about the various organizations you're involved with and the presentations and yeah.
So we were down at my brother-in-law's house down in Albuquerque, and Joe's dad had just passed away, and Joe's dad was a World War II pilot, and his mother was one of the women that used to fly the aircraft to the
Wasps.
The Wasp, yeah.
Wow.
And so he brought up a book that an Air Force magazine. He said, "You ever seen this?" And I hadn't done anything with the Air Force after I got out in '64 till just about '92. And let me get a drink here, man. Mm-hmm. But so I'm paging through there, and I see an ad for a colonel up in Breckenridge that wants to start a Missileer group. So I called him up, and I joined one of the founding members, and we had our first meeting and first couple of meetings, and we about that time we were there one of the meetings, and General Gray, one of the generals on the thing, started complaining about they'd got rid of the Strategic Air Command, and up in Omaha they had called it, changed it to Stratcom, and they were alternating every year. With the first year would be the Air Force general would be in charge, with his adjutant or his junior partner would be a Navy admiral. Then the next change of command, they'd go back and forth. And he was complaining about the admiral that put this big, ugly Polaris missile in front of SAC headquarters. And I said to him, I said, "You're talking about Mike Colley?" And he says, "How do you know him?" I'm just I'm an E4. He's a general officer and stuff. And I said, "Well, he's my sister-in-law's dad." So I told him the picture, told him the story about that. So he sent me back a picture, and I took our next national meeting, and I had this big picture of the SAC headquarters with the Polaris missile in front of it. And he had autographed for me. He says, "Greetings, Jim, from Offutt Naval Air Station." And he signed it, by Admiral Colley. And so it was, I got a lot of kick out of it. But then we ended up with trips to Vandenberg, to Washington, D.C., Cape Canaveral. We were at Cape Canaveral when John Glenn went up before he went up in the shuttle.
Oh, right, yeah.
And we got to go between they had 2 shuttles on pads at that time, and we were between those. We had a lot of general officers in our group, so they got a lot of horsepower to get us on trips. One of the trips down to Barksdale, my wife's on the line with 45 different 45 B-52s. And then I was just up in Great Falls, Montana, and I mean Great Falls, North Dakota, and I got to be on the flight line with about 15 B-2s, or B-1s they were, yeah. So it just, we've been up to the 50th anniversary of the Cuban crisis up in up in Montana, and at Maelstrom Air Force Base. Ran into my old staff sergeant, and he got to meet him. I hadn't seen him in about 50 years. And he introduced him to my wife, and he says, "Glad to meet you." He says, I carried Jim longer than his mother did." So it's been a good group. And then I got involved with the site off of in Wyoming that's west of town near Granite Canyon. I don't know if you've spent much time in Wyoming. It's not far from where 285 goes up and gets near Laramie. It's just outside of Laramie. And they have a plume of trichloroethylene that's that in 50 years traveled 10 miles, and the water treatment plant is 20 miles away. And they've trying to clean up that plume, and they were unsure of they had all these stories about how trichloroethylene was used on the missiles. And when I told you earlier, we would do a dual propellant loading at the 180-day cycle, where we would simulate a launch with the fuel loaded. Afterwards, we had to flush the engines with trichloroethylene to get the residue fuel out so it wouldn't gel and block the engines out. And then it was just dumped down the flame bucket and ended up in the water table. So some of these, one of the sites I worked on, they went down, the allowable parts per billion is 5 parts per billion in the soil. And one of the sites, 564C1, that it's at 90 feet, it was like 250,000 parts per billion. So they've got this procedures where they aerate them, they put some different chemicals down, they're doing different stuff. It's kind of organic, and they put stuff down, and it minimizes, or they can bring the water up like at the treatment plant, and they have scrubbers, and all they do is aerate the water, and it'll evaporate the trichloroethylene. We used to wash our hands with it.
Wow.
And our instructions in the tech orders were always avoid breathing the vapors or contact with painted surfaces. That was all we were ever told. No.
But you've never had experienced any medical conditions?
No.
Oh, man. Wow.
Yeah.
And I noticed you, various things you showed me, you make presentations to various groups as well.
Yeah. So I did the presentations for the Army Corps of Engineers. In fact, on that site, they knew I had photographs of what I took before, so they took me to take out before and after photographs. And if you look on their the Army Corps of Engineers sites, you'll see my old and my new photographs.
Really?
And so I've done presentations. Probably the best one was I did one on our involvement with the Cuban crisis. Down at the Air Force Academy for a class of cadets. And to get into the class with the cadets, they got invited there. In fact, what had happened is I was at a car show in Lafayette here, and I saw a pair of Air Force plates, and it was a professor from the Air Force Academy. I introduced myself and showed him my card. And about 3 months later, I get an invitation to do this presentation.
Wow.
And you go into the Air Force Academy, they take your driver's license away, they give you a lanyard with with an ID that lets you into the cadet area. I got there a couple hours early. They let you walk around. See the big bust of Curtis LeMay, and a photograph, a big painting of the when they World War II, when they bombed the Romanian oil fields in Poletsky.
Oh, right, yeah.
And our 389th, we were the 389th missile wing. Well, the 389th Bomb Wing Heavy was one of the 6 units that bombed that. And I just got to walk around for a couple hours, and cadets would salute and say, "Sir, what are you doing here?" I went and had lunch and sat down at a table, and pretty soon I had 5 cadets sitting around me talking. And we gave the class, and after the class, every cadet came up and shook my hand and thanked me. Chris said, "What was it like?" I says, "It was kind of amazing." I said, "There are no nose rings, dreadlocks, tattoos." Yeah. So it was really quite an experience. That's one of the better presentations I ever did.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And we've done them, like I said, I did them for 20th Air Force for 2 different commanders' calls. I did one in Omaha once too. But and then United Launch Alliance. I went down. That was an interesting one. I went down to Littleton, and I'm in a big classroom. It must be. And there's big 3 screens in the back, so my PowerPoint would be in multiple areas, and all these tables with chairs on one side. This is to listen to like a lecture or something, and people were watching me in other buildings on their computers, and somebody from Alabama gets on, and they ask me a question, and they come over the PA system, and I could answer that. But what interesting is when I walked in there, a fellow said. Was sitting there waiting for me. He says, "Mr. Widlar, I'm Scott Haskell. Do you remember me?" And I said, "Yes." And it was one of the fellows my son was in the Boy Scouts with in hygiene. Huh. And he had gone to the Air Force Academy. And he said, "How's Mike doing?" And I handed him the phone. I called Mike, gave him the phone. So he got out of the Air Force and went to work for United Launch Alliance. So I got to go out to Vandenberg, to Cape Canaveral, and one of the presentations, there's a picture in there, I got to meet Tory Bruno, that was the CEO of United Launch Alliance. Well, these guys all talk about rockets, And so when I went up, I was wearing one of my shirts, and he said, "Oh, you're one of the missileers, aren't you?" so it was kind of fun it's fun to keep the history alive.
Oh, absolutely.
And I meet a lot of people that I've run into that have been in this thing before and are surprised. I just finished a presentation up in Greeley, and when I went up there, they were helped them with their Cold War exhibit that ran from, I think it was May to December, and they're going to put it on virtually now too.
Okay.
And so I went up there. There was the first speaker who was going to do. He did a fiction book about that missile site in Greeley, and I went up there and I turned around. Here's a fellow wearing an Air Force hat with one of our missile badges on it. And he says, "I remember," he said, "I met you up at the Cheyenne Museum." Well, it's Bob McDonald out of Loveland, and he was a missileer. He met me up at the Cheyenne Museum, so I had my presentation. He was on a launch crew. I was on launch maintenance crew, so I had him come when I did my presentation, so he could give his interpretation of being on a launch crew. When I prepped the missiles, he was there that sat those things sat there waiting to launch them.
Huh. Wow. Well, talk a little bit about. You were pretty much in the infancy of missiles.
Yeah.
And you've seen so much in that time span to the present day. What are your thoughts on? Just your general thoughts on that whole...
I think that when they land in these things and they land them on the barges, and then they one of the SpaceX launches, when they set that thing into the Indian Ocean, and they already have lighted buoys there, filming it coming down. That they're pretty accurate on where they're going.
Yeah. Wow.
No.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to talk about? And what we'll do after the interview here is I'd like to record whatever pictures, so we'll do that, and that I'm sure that'll spawn some stories as well.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I think that handles it for right now.
Yeah. I guess the last question I always like to ask in these interviews, as you look at the time, that period of time in the Air Force and everything you went through, did it affect your life, change your life, play a role in your life at all? Or do you look at it simply as just one of many chapters in your life? How would you answer that?
Well, I think it gave you a lot more discipline. I think, yeah. And I think it was good to go. I think everybody should go in and serve it. I think it wouldn't hurt them.
Yeah.
And just to realize what's out there. But I've really got some. There are really some professional people in it now. There are a lot of these ladies out there that are 2- and 3-star generals, and there's some smart gals in some of this stuff. In fact, when I went to give the presentation, I said, "Who's anybody?" And I brought a bunch of missile chocolate bars. And I said there was one gal there, and I said, who's going to be pilots and who's going to be in the missiles? And all the guys raised their hand about being pilots, and she raised her hand about missiles. So I said, here's the chocolate. I said, you can share if you want to.
Oh, very good. Well, Jim, I want to thank you for sitting down to tell your very fascinating story. But I also want to thank you for your service to our country.
Oh, it was great. Very great. That's my service picture when I showed up at F.E. Warren Air Force Base when we were loading a ICBM on the Cargo Master. Don Frank was so mad at me for my uniform and my hat and everything. He nominated me for Airman of the Month, and he enrolled me in Airman Leadership School as punishment.
Okay, and then down here to your shadow box?
That's a shadow box with on the right, a best grandfather's ribbon my grandson Leo made me.
Oh, excellent. And can you talk a little bit about some of the...
just has
ribbons
my dog tags and just souvenirs and just different pins of the different commands I was on. The lighter in the lower right-hand corner, the cigarette lighter, is a Zippo that says Atlas, or F.E. Warren, home of the Atlas. So, and my dog tags. And,
well, it looks like you got a presidential citation there. What was that for?
The presidential citation, we wore that when we were in the 389th because that was for the 389th won that presidential citation for the raid on the Pulaski oil fields.
Oh, right, okay.
So everybody, when you're in the 389th, got to wear them.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And then I'll come down here to this bottom one.
That's my wife's Chris. That's her dad.
Oh, I'll be darned.
Yeah, and he was a Korean War veteran. He's passed on now.
Okay, go.
This is an abbreviated launch checklist for emergency procedures that happen during a launch, and I was able to find these on eBay.
Wow.
And someday they'll be in a museum.
Yeah, right.
So,
isn't that something?
Yeah. the 90th Missile Wing commander up at F.E. Warren Air Force Base nominated me for Veterans in Blue, which was this hung in the Pentagon for a couple of years. Every year they select different veterans to be up on the.
Outstanding.
Yeah.